So what the reporter does next is go back to the completed script, and every place where she sees her name, in this case her name is going to be host, she records those portions onto her recorder. This is what you will be doing. You go back to your completed script, you grab your recording device, you hit the record button, and you start reading. When he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture. Then I read here. Plenty of us have felt this at one time or another, but one day, noting the intensity of worship of a single reality star, what they could get, okay, and then I read. Now, if I didn't like that, I just say take over and I keep recording. Plenty of us have felt this at one time or another, but one day, noting the intensity of worship a single reality star could get, the next one for the host, Brett had a devious idea, a way he felt he could prove to us what celebrity craving suckers we all are. Okay, and after I go through and record all of my narration on this, or after you go through and record all of your narration on your recording device, then you have all the elements together and you are ready to begin the editing process. So let's take a look at how that's done. So I will say at this point, I know there are a couple of students in the class who have never done any type of audio editing before and they have no idea even how to start the process. If you are one of those people, what I'd like you to do is stop the video you're watching right now and go back to Moodle. There's another video there in this section. It's called How to Record and Edit Using Audacity. You'll also find a print version after you've watched the video. Go ahead and learn how to actually load Audacity into your computer and how you use the function keys of Audacity before you move ahead with this, because this will probably make you very confused. For the rest of you who have had experience either with Audacity or another type of editing software, feel free to use whichever audio editing software that you would like. I'll be demonstrating using Audacity, but you should find that the concept is the same across all of the editing formats. So feel free to use whatever you want as long as the final project is edited in the correct way. So the first thing we do once we have all of our elements together is to go ahead and turn on your Audacity. You'll see that I have preloaded a couple of elements already to move things a little bit quicker. So one of the elements that you need to import is the interview that you've conducted. In your case, you're going to input at least 3 interviews, so you're going to have 3 timelines that are filled with interviews. In this case, this is the interview with Brett. It would sound something like,
there's so many people who are famous nowadays for doing absolutely nothing.
Okay, so that was the interview that we conducted with Brett, and then we'll mute that for a minute, and then we'll take a look here after all the interviews are imported. This is the recording that I just did. I brought it in here by saying File and Import and Audio and bringing it up out of the recording device. Went ahead and found the file that I wanted, clicked on that, and click on Open. As soon as you click on Open, in this particular software, it will open up the timeline for you. What you're going to hear in this timeline is my voice, what I've just recorded. When he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture. I've also imported some of my natural sound ahead of time. This would be the paparazzi. And then if I mute that and I open up this timeline, I've also imported a file with some screaming fans. Okay. And then the last thing that you want to import to make sure you have in here is your music to open, and you'll see how it creates. If you wait a couple seconds, you'll see it's opening up the music that I chose, and it will create a new timeline for us here. Here's the new timeline with the music. We'll take a listen to that. And that will be music that I choose to use at points throughout the edited piece. Okay, so now we have loaded up all of the different files that we've recorded, and we have those all ready in our Audacity, and we're ready to start the editing process. And what I recommend is to create a brand new track. to edit onto. So, or timeline and track would be the same thing. So I go to track at the top, click on add new, go to stereo track. It's important that you have the 2 lines. See here you have 1, 2. So we're always editing with a stereo track. And I click on that, and you'll notice at the bottom that I've created a brand new track. This is the portion that we're going to be doing our editing on, this brand new timeline. And so you go back to your script once you have this new timeline created, and you find the first thing in your script is when you, as the reporter, you recorded this, saying when he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was his celebrity culture. So I go back into the line where I recorded that. I unmute this portion, and this should be me speaking.
When he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture. Plenty of us have felt this at one time or another.
So I just want to use the first portion, right? So I highlight that. I copy it, in my case by Control-C or Command-C. Then I scroll down to the brand new timeline that I just created, and I right-click and paste, or I put my cursor there and do Control-V or Command-V for pasting. So now this portion, and we'll mute the one that we had up on the top. Remember, this was our raw material of me reading. I mute this. Everything takes a little longer. Then I scroll down to the bottom. On my new timeline, you see that I have recorded this.
When he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture.
Okay, we have the first portion here. Then we go back into our script and see that the next thing that we want to take is where Brett said, so we just recorded this portion. Now we want this portion. There were so many people who were famous nowadays for doing absolutely nothing, blah, 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 blah. So that's the portion I'm looking for right now. So we go back to Audacity, we unmute Brett's portion, and we highlight the portion where he says,
There's so many people who are famous nowadays for doing absolutely nothing, just for living and driving cars and wearing clothes, showing up at events, walking the red carpet.
Okay, so we're going to grab and highlight the element that he just said, which is the soundbite that was chosen. You copy this element. After you've copied it, you go down to your new timeline. You put your cursor right next to the portion that was before it. And then you Command-V or Control-V that section. So you have that right at the beginning, and then you have Brett's voice right next to that. You go to anything that's still open, like Brett's original, and you mute that. And you go down to your new timeline, and you unmute it, and you play this, then you will hear,
He was in college. The thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture.
There's so many people who are famous nowadays for doing absolutely nothing, just for living and driving cars and wearing clothes, showing up at events, walking the red carpet.
Now you'll notice that there was an actual bit of a space in between the two, and you really don't want that. So what you do is go to this tool that looks like a two-sided arrow, and that allows you to grab this whole piece and scooch it right next door. Then when you go back and you click on and listen to it again, you should hear less of a space.
It was celebrity culture.
There's so many people who are famous now.
And you want it even tighter than that. So let's go and use this plus button to see, as we enlarge this timeline, that there's actual space between here and here. And we want the end of my words and the beginning of his words to be much tighter. To go ahead and highlight this whole portion. And after you've highlighted, click the delete button. Now if you listen back to it, it sounds like
Culture.
There's so many people who are famous nowadays for doing
And that's what you want. You want that tightness that it seems like it's flowing from your voice into their voice. And what we have so far in editing of the story is just two elements, right? If you look back at the script that you've written, you have this, and then you have this put together. Okay, then we go ahead and we look for the second portion. As you remember in the script, it says plenty of us have felt this way at one time or another. And if we go and find the second portion here,
Plenty of us have felt this at one time or another, but one day, noting the intensity of worship of a single reality star,
so we copy that portion and we mute that, and then we go down to the bottom and we add this as our third element on the timeline. And we would add that, unmute this here. So now if you check back in with your sample script, you see you have the first sentence from yourself, the second sentence was edited from Brett, the next one was yourself, the reader again, and it should sound like this if you put them all together.
when he was in college, the thing that annoyed Brett Cohen the most was celebrity culture.
There's so many people who are famous nowadays for doing absolutely nothing, just for living and driving cars and wearing clothes, showing up at events, walking the red carpet.
Plenty of us have felt this at one time or another.
Okay, so now you see that basically what you're doing is following along with the script, and you continue that way with a sentence from the narration, then the next part from the person interviewed, then another narration, then maybe another person who was interviewed, narration, more interview, narration, more interview. At some point, though, you're going to want to start adding some sound effects. We'll call them natural sound is actually what we're looking for. And in that respect, what you want to do, and let's go down to a location where we have that in the script. There was a portion where she said, so a few days later, Brett goes onto Craigslist, finds a whole bunch of big guys who are willing to play his bodyguards, and he gets a friend to play his assistant and a whole swarm of people to play the paparazzi. And then we go to Brett saying, basically anyone who owned a camera with a flash was qualified to be paparazzi. And then you see that's where you have your natural sound of camera clicking coming in. So while I have created already just this section here, the part that we're talking
So
about.
a few days later, Brett goes onto Craigslist and finds a whole bunch of big guys who are willing to play his bodyguards. Then he gets a friend to play his assistant and a whole swarm of people to play the paparazzi.
Basically, anyone who owned a camera with a flash was qualified to be a paparazzi.
Then if we want to add in the natural sound of clicking under both my narration and under his speaking, or even under his portion and then a little bit of just the natural sound, then we would go back and create a second new timeline. We do that by going to Tracks, Add New, Stereo Track, and then go to the sounds of the paparazzi. All right. And we decide to put in about this much of paparazzi background. We copy that. Then we go down into our new timeline, and we decide that we want to put this somewhere between my narration and when he starts talking about paparazzi. So we'll put it here. We'll paste that underneath. So what we have now is my narration, his interview, and the sound of paparazzi all at the same time. So let's hear if we now unmute these two lines and we start playing it from here. This is what it would sound like.
So a few days later, Brett goes onto Craigslist and finds a whole bunch of big guys who are willing to play his bodyguards. Then he gets a friend to play his assistant and a whole swarm of people to play the paparazzi.
Basically, anyone who owned a camera with a flash was qualified to be a paparazzi.
Okay, now what we've noted here is that the natural sound in the background outweighed his voice, and that's not what we want. So if we want to be able to bring down the natural sound but still have it in the back, we have another editing technique, and that is you take the portion that you want to be lowered, you go up above into the segment where it says Effects, you click on Amplify, And in this section that says new peak amplitude, you want to bring it lower than what it currently is. And we'll bring this down to -20. Click Allow Clipping, say OK. And the effect now looks like that for amplitude modulation. Now let's listen to it.
Be a paparazzi.
You want your natural sound pop, as we call it, right there where we had a pop, not to last longer than 2 seconds or 3 seconds at the most. So you would cut that off at 2 or 3 seconds by deleting that, and then bring the next narration up. In our script, it says the next thing that happened was the host or the reader, that is you, says, and then the day came. So then we go back into our line. We'll mute these two for a second. We look for the narration piece, and we look for the sentence where it says, and then the day came. We go back into Audacity, look for and then the day came.
And then the day came.
So we would copy this by highlighting it and then copy. We'll mute this line. And then we go back into our edited script. After there was quite a lot of noise here, click, 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 click. And on this line, we want to paste that sentence. So now if we unmute these two portions, the portions that we're editing with, it sounds like
Of people to play the paparazzi.
Basically, anyone who owned a camera with a flash was qualified to be a paparazzi.
And then the day came.
Okay, now let's say that at this juncture it calls for background music, mood setting music. So at this juncture what you actually need to do is go back into Audacity and create a third new timeline. So for that you go into Tracks, Add New, add a stereo track, and this is where you would bring your music track in. Right after we hear click, 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 and the narrator, which is you, starts the next sentence, the notes call for bringing up music here. So on our line down here, we would bring in the music background. So let's find where our music is. This looks like our music, and this was the music, you remember? So we decide to grab the music, a portion of it, from here to here, let's say. And then we copy and we paste this music on our third new line, and we paste it right here underneath where the clicking of the camera stopped. We paste it. We'll go back up to the original music and mute that so it's not bothering us. And we open all three of our new lines. We unmute this one, and we unmute this one. And we listen to what we have so far from these three lines.
So a few days later, Brett goes onto Craigslist and finds a whole bunch of big guys who are willing to play his bodyguards. Then he gets a friend to play his assistant and a whole swarm of people to play the paparazzi.
Basically, anyone who owned a camera with a flash was qualified to be a paparazzi.
And then the day came.
Again, we see that the level of this music is a bit too loud. So again, we highlight it. We go into Effect, Amplify, and we bring this down. Let's try again to -20. -20. We allow clipping and say OK. As it processes, you see that it has shrunk. We listen to this portion again.
A paparazzi.
And then the day came.
And then you see the music is lower, and it allows for us to hear what the reader is actually saying. So it's a good mix of music. So this is how you do it. You add a clip of yourself, followed by a soundbite and another clip, and a clip of the interviewee, and then maybe some natural sound, and then maybe some music with narration on top of the music. When you go through all of that in your script, which is 4 to 8 minutes long, which is quite a lot of work, then you go back into Audacity. You make sure only the final 3 new lines are open and unmuted. You have mixed them already so that the audio level is correct, that the background music is not overpowering the narration, or that the natural sound is not overpowering the narration, and save your project. So with these 3 lines open, your 3 new lines, you will do File, Save the project. After it's saved, you will export it. You'll call this whatever the name of your podcast story is. So in this case, it would be A New Inside. I'm going to save this to Documents. You could save it to your desktop. You want to try to save it as an MP3. And you click Save. It indicates that your tracks will be mixed to 2 stereo channels. That means these 3 tracks that you put together will be mixed just as you have set them up. And you say OK. These elements, not to worry about, just click OK here. And now you are saving your completed story as an MP3 in your documents, and you will be able to attach this file, your completed podcast, to your assignment in Moodle. You will see that there was a link here that said post completed podcast here. You'll go add a new discussion topic, say a simple sentence. This is my completed podcast. You can even say what the topic is, and then just attach the file, the MP3 file that you have finished there. So this is the essence of how you put your podcast together. There are many parts to it. It will take many days to probably finish. You're not going to get it done at one sitting. So take a little bit of time and don't wait till the last minute on Sunday night to do it. A couple of reminders. The requirements of this assignment are that you include 4 to 5 segments of natural sound. It could be the same pieces of natural sound used at different times, but it has to be used appropriately. So that means, as an example, let's say you have natural sound of a creaky door opening, then it needs to be placed in a segment of the story where you're talking about somebody entering a room or going through a door or something like that. And then the narration would have to coincide with that. It would have to reflect what's going on with the sound. So you could be saying something like, he was worried there might be someone inside, so he headed right past through the room, through the squeaky door, so that you have words that match with the natural sound that you have in the background. As far as music goes, there are no specific requirements of how much music you want to use, but feel free to use it as liberally as you can, as liberally as you want. It helps sometimes to make sure this very long story stays interesting and keeps people wanting to listen. That reminds me, speaking of the length requirement, remember that the story, the recorded section, I'm not talking about the introduction, the recorded section that you're going to post has to be edited, and it has to be between 4 and 8 minutes long. All stories, I would like you to end them with your name. Say, as soon as you get to the end of the story, pause and say, I'm Kathy Shafran. That's how you end it. And then I would like music to fade out at the very, very end. That is the essence of everything that you're being asked to do. It's a huge project. If you have any questions along the way, any problems with editing, please email me as you have those problems, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I do not, I think I should point this out, respond to people while I'm sleeping. Other than that, you should hear from me pretty quickly. Good luck. It's a big project. I know you'll do well. I look forward to hearing your stories.